All right. It is 11 o'clock on the dot, so I say let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our webinar this morning. It is a collaboration between iColin and the CTL, and we are fortunate to have Dr. Scott Cheney with us today, who's going to be presenting about the benefits of asynchronous video in online learning. I will be watching the chat while he presents, so feel free to post any questions you have there along the way, but he'll also be saving some time at the end for further discussion and some open Q&A as well. So, excuse me, without further ado, Scott, I will turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm excited to be able to share some of the things I've been doing in the classroom. And I wanted to start just by thanking Allison and the Center for Teaching and Learning, as well as iColin, my dean and associate dean, Sarah Lee and Jill Nugent, for this opportunity. So thanks again for coming, and we'll just jump in. I'll see if I can share my screen, and we'll go from there. Okay. Okay. Let's see, I'm pushing the wrong button. Sorry. I know how to use PowerPoint, but PowerPoint and Zoom at the same time, it's a little harder. Give me just a sec. Okay. Okay, so asynchronous engagement, the benefits of asynchronous video and online learning. I was able to give this talk this summer thanks to COE. I was presenting at the Learning Ideas Conference in New York City this summer, and it was really a great conference, and I enjoyed my time there. And that's where this comes from. I've been teaching at Collins for 10 years now, and most of those have been in Plano until this last fall, when I started with iColin as an English instructor. And so I've been fully online since last fall, but I have been dabbling in online learning for a long time, which I'll talk about in a minute. I'll give you a quick overview of where we're headed. I'll talk about my online experience, and then we'll get into some of the research. First, distance learning research in general, starting back in 1989. And then we'll move into specifically my research on asynchronous video. And I say my research, but it's the research I've found that other people have been doing for a long time now. And then I'll talk about the current available applications that we can use that are available, most of them free. And then we'll talk about a course pilot that I did in the spring and summer of this year. And then we'll end with discussion and comments. I'm always looking to hear from others. And so I am just starting out using some of these ideas in my classes. And so I look forward to hearing from you as well. And of course, if you have questions afterwards, you can feel free to email me. My email is pretty simple, scheney@collin.edu. So let's first talk about some of my experiences teaching online. In 2011, I was a grad student in Chicago. I went to Loyola University, Chicago. I was on the job market while also taking grad school, and I was already thinking about online learning. I've heard about these online classes that people were teaching. So I emailed my English department chair, and I asked about it. Are there any of these classes? And she said, "Oh, well, I've heard of those. We don't have them yet. And if we do, probably you won't get one as a grad student." That's probably true. But at that time, I was still thinking about it, still wanting to learn more about it, figure out what it was. And so as I came to Collin, I started teaching online in different aspects and different modalities, probably starting in about, well, I came in 2012, but started in 2013, 2014, teaching online in hybrid, blended, and fully online courses. And looking back at those, most of my courses were largely text-based. Discussion boards were big for those. That was the main form of communication usually. And discussion boards can be good, and a lot of times some students really thrive in discussion boards, and really I've had students say the discussion board is probably the favorite part of my course, but that's certainly not a majority of students don't say I love the discussion boards. And then sometimes in discussion boards, I'll have them post images, a lot of times at the first discussion board of the semester, and that's fun, but it lacks this kind of real interaction where you feel like you're interacting with a human rather than just text on the screen. That feeling of true conversation seems to be missing a lot of times. And so I found that my motivated students, even if I have a poorly designed course, will succeed. They'll find a way. They actually read the syllabus, and as we know, that's not every student. And so it's those students who are on the margins, those who are kind of busy with other classes, teaching full-time, have families and other responsibilities. These are the students that I kind of have in mind when I think about teaching online, and I've been wanting to find a way to engage those kinds of students as well. And so how can I engage students and get them to feel like a part of the class? That's the question that I've been working on, that I've been thinking about for a long time. Like, what's something that could, dare I say it, be fun? Something that students might actually think, oh, I wonder what's going on in Professor Cheney's class this week. I better go look. Like, that probably doesn't happen that often, but I've been wanting to find something like that. And so we'll start into some of the research. As I've been listening to other webinars, as I've been doing some research, a lot of times this article has come up. And as I looked on Google Scholar to see how many times it'd been cited, and I didn't look it up this morning to get the exact number, but it's in the thousands. This is a huge article. The American Journal of Distance Education was actually started by Michael G. Moore, who was a retired Penn State professor in 1987. And so, this is before, we were online in the way, of course, that we are now. But they were talking about these ideas, and distance education is something, of course, that's been going on for many, I don't know, I could probably even say centuries, depending on how things were either, through the mail, or I don't know, by horseback or something. I don't know how it was so long ago, but this was still early in the process for us. And Michael G. Moore used this, a very short article, as more of an editorial, perhaps an introduction to an issue here in 1989. But it's something that I keep hearing. So I went back and actually read it, and it was good. I can see why it was important. And so we'll talk a little bit about it. I'll start with a quotation, and then we'll talk about his 3 types of interaction. But this quotation is helpful. Many of the greatest problems of distance education arise from our use of crude hypothetical constructs, terms like distance, independence, and interaction, which are used in very imprecise and general ways, each having acquired a multiplicity of meanings. So this was 1989, but it kind of feels like it could be today. So we have maybe the same problem at a different time with different technologies. Every week I'll get an email from somebody that's talking about how to engage online learners, or maybe there's this word of interaction, online interaction, or and I trying to get students involved in their identities and their voice heard online. The irony, of course, is that I'm using one of those words, engagement, in my title, but these are the same kinds of issues that we are dealing with today. So the 3 types of interaction are pretty straightforward. You'd think about the learner to content. Of course, this is the learner reading stuff, the textbook, listening to lectures, maybe watching videos, those kinds of things. Learner to instructor. This is also pretty typical. The learner comes to class to hear from the professor, from the instructor. Ideally, students will be interacting, asking questions, sending emails, seeing how the instructor would respond. And then, of course, learner to learner. This one in face-to-face classes, a lot of times we'll have students break up into groups, ask questions, do group projects. They're learning together. And online, of course, this is not as easy, but it's possible and something that we're working here. This is maybe more rare than the others, but students and professors know it's effective. In our faculty development conference at the beginning of the year, the speaker, Dr. Tolman, talked about this, the idea of student resistance to, I guess, things that are actually helping them learn. And so this is maybe something that students don't want to do. They'd rather, I think a lot of my students want to take an online course so they can be anonymous, but that's not how students will learn the best. And so this learner to learner interaction is super important. So we'll talk about each of these briefly and then move on to more recent research. So learner to content. In more recent times, learners have interacted with content broadcast on radio and television programs, and with electronic recordings on audio tape, videotape, and computer software. This is my favorite sentence. Interactive video disc is the most advanced form of didactic interaction invented so far. Does anybody remember using a laser disc in the classroom? In 1989, these were cutting edge technologies. I only knew one person who had a laser disc player. The one on the right is a DVD or maybe a CD or something like that. But I was giving when I was giving this talk before, I had a student, or I had a colleague who said he was teaching at this time, and the school had purchased a laser disc player, and they didn't give him a textbook. They just gave him a laser disc and a TV, that he rolled it in on the cart, and he said it was terrible. But this, it's just to give a sense of how far things have come. And again, we're dealing with new technologies and having some of the same problems, but they're not new problems necessarily. Learner to instructor. Here's another quotation from the article. Distance instructors seek to stimulate, or at least maintain, the student's interest in what is to be taught, to motivate the students to learn, to enhance and maintain the learner's interest, including self-direction and motivation. We are, whether we like it or not, encouragers. We're hopefully and like motivating, helping our students to want to aspire to reach their goals. We send emails, we talk, we hope the students will stay after class, if there is an after class, that they will that want to talk and ask questions. This idea is called instructor presence in the literature. So it's something that as we get into the asynchronous video research, that will come up quite a bit. This idea of in an online course, does the instructor feel present to the students? And then learner to learner. Educators gave their students the advantage of individual interaction with the instructor by electronic correspondence, and then the benefits of peer group interaction by asynchronous email and by synchronous computer, and they put it in quotation marks, chatting. That's probably the part that I like the most, this idea of the benefits of peer group interaction. And of course, email and chat at this time, 1989, were pretty advanced new technologies. This is the piece that I've been looking for, as I mentioned before, the benefits of peer group interaction online. That's what I set out to find an answer to as I started the research. And so let's get into that research a little bit. Don't worry, it'll get more interesting. I find that looking at the first page of a peer-reviewed article pretty interesting, so I hope you do too, but I won't spend too much time on it. But this is the earliest article I could find, from 2009. It talked about, they called it instructor immediacy, the idea of the instructor presence, is the instructor available and present to the students. And then the other side of that, they called it social presence, another term that will come up in the research. And so do the students feel engaged? Is there the sense that they will be involved in the class and be interacting with other students and with the professor in a real way. And so in 2009, we had the internet, but there wasn't an easy way to share videos. And so they actually had students record videos and then email them. And so they would email the videos to the instructor would watch it and then email them back. It sounds kind of clunky, but I guess it worked for them. And they found that there was potential to form close relationships. There was some benefits that they noticed that they couldn't have otherwise without video. 3 years later, in 2012, on this article by Borup, West, and Graham, you'll notice that some of the names come up more than once. But improving online social presence through asynchronous video, they wanted, I like this phrase that they use, they wanted to create a community of inquiry. And so not just a community, but a community that's trying to do something, trying to find something out. And they also wanted this to feel like there's actual real people doing that. And so they used an early version of VoiceThread, which is still around, but it was 2012. It wasn't working very well for them. They wanted something that worked better. But they did also, like in the 2009 article, they found that the instructor presence and the sense of community, that social presence for students, was actually improved as a result of video. And I have a quotation from this article. I'll just read the highlighted parts. The results of this study do indicate that the use of asynchronous video communication may be beneficial to instructors who wish to improve the social presence in their courses. And so using VoiceThread, they found was helpful for instructor presence. And then also we recognize that a threaded and easily implemented video discussion tool should be developed. And of course, in the last 10 years, lots of things have been developed, and we'll be talking about some of those more now. And then let's move on to the next one. This is 2015. Comparing asynchronous and synchronous video versus text-based discussions in an online teacher education course. A lot of times these articles have been about come from education departments and students who are learning how to teach. And so I found that interesting that they have mostly, and I'm an English professor, of course, and I use these, I've been using asynchronous video in my literature courses. And so any course that has the need for conversation, for discussion should work well. So they compared, I think they had 2 courses they were working on together. And they had, for the first half of the semester, they had one group just doing text-based discussion boards, and the other one was posting videos on something called Google Plus. I don't know if you remember this. I had a Google Plus account, and then I realized I didn't know why, because nobody else was on there. And of course, Google Plus died. But at the time, that's where they were posting their videos. So the technology that they were looking for in 2012 was already starting to improve, even if Google Plus wasn't popular. And students, probably it's unsurprising to find out that students preferred the video part. So halfway through the semester, both classes switched. So the people that were doing written discussion boards moved to video, and vice versa. And so one thing that they did say, though, is that it wasn't all or nothing, and that they had some students who said that they liked a little bit of both. And that's something I've actually taken into to my courses. I haven't abandoned text-based discussion boards altogether. So maybe one week you'll have a video, the next week you'll have a written post, and that allows students who enjoy one over the other to have both options available. 2020. So this, what you can see that they, I guess it doesn't give us a month, but 2020, COVID pushed all of us online, and these were already online professors that started to use different ideas. And so this one, they used Flipgrid, Camtasia with EdConnect. They had a new improved version of VoiceThread that they used. And of course, it was very important during lockdown to be able to use some of these options. And their findings kind of said that just depending on what you're doing, any of these options will work. Okay, so that's all I'm going to for you with the research, but this is a helpful slide, I think. And probably the most helpful is the link at the top, blogs.umass.edu /online tools. This is a blog that's put together again by I think an education department, and it has all of these tools that I have pictures of. These are just the ones that are discussion based, but it has all sorts of educational technologies, and they have a page for each one, and they kind of review them and give you resources for them and videos. And so if you're thinking about new technologies and you haven't seen this site, I would look into it. A bunch of undergraduates have been working on it with their professor for a number of years, so something to check out. But Padlet, Netboard, VoiceThread, Kaltura, and then at the bottom, Flipgrid. When I started with this in the spring of 2022, that's what it was called, Flipgrid. And I actually didn't really like their logo very much, and so they changed it for me. In June, they switched to Flip, and so they have a new logo, which has a nice little smiley face that I like better. But they're still the same. It's the same product, but they have changed their name. They announced this in June, actually, at their annual conference called Flip Fest. But I found out about Flip from another one of our faculty development conferences. Dr. Agrawal, I think in January, talked about it. She used it in her courses, so I gave it a try, and I've liked it. And so I like I mentioned, I did course pilots with Padlet and Flip. These were the most well represented in the research that I was finding. Quite a few articles came up that kept mentioning these two applications, and so I decided to do the two of them together. You'll find out. You probably already guessed that I like Flip better, but Padlet definitely has its positives. It's a good product, and I think probably the biggest benefit to it is that it has a lot of tools. It can do quite a few different things. And this is from my course pilot in the spring. It's a screenshot. You can make lots of Padlets, I guess is what they're called. So you create a Padlet, and then you invite students to come and contribute to it. I think I should have mentioned this earlier. In the spring, when I was doing the pilot, I was running two different literature classes, and I used Padlet in one and Flip in the other, well, Flipgrid at the time. And I found that Flip worked better, but Padlet had a lot of good things, just things that I wasn't really using, and actually kind of detracted from what I was doing. So one of the things that I didn't like is there's not an easy group function, and maybe that's changed, but I couldn't figure out a way to have one class kind of grouped together with a list of all the boards. Each board was kind of separate, and so they would have to be invited to each one. And the other problem was that it cost $10 a month, which wasn't a huge deal, but Flip is free, and it's put out by Microsoft, and so I think it's going to remain free. And so let's see. Oh yeah, so one other thing about Padlet, it's nice. I like the graphics, but the video presentation isn't intuitive, and of course that's what I was trying to do with asynchronous video. And so being able to have video respond to video, and students relating to each other, having that interactive feel, it didn't work very well for me. One of the reasons was that it's mostly text is the default, and so when you create a new Padlet or a new post on your Padlet, there's a blinking cursor, and so it's just asking you to type something. And so even though I would ask students in the directions, please post a video, they would just type their response, and it's like that's not what we're trying to do here. And you can see here on this slide that there's a picture icon, and there's a link, and I don't know what that is, another search for a picture, but then you see the three dots on the right in the pink shape. You had to click that to get to a video recorder, and so the video option wasn't obvious. In fact, it was almost hidden. You had to click to a sub menu to find it. And so Padlet has a lot of options, and if you're doing something else, it might work very well, but for my purposes, it wasn't great. Okay, so again, Flipgrid became Flip in June. and it has a lot of the functions that I was looking for. It's completely video based. Not completely, you can type text in, but it's video first would be maybe a way to think about it. The group function is nice, and so this is a screenshot from my summer course. British literature just has a few posts. It has one thing that I like about it. It has GIFs. I'm sorry if I pronounce that incorrectly, if you like the other pronunciation, but I can have a nice moving image, and particularly like the hello bear. And then you can see that it, depending on what we're talking about that week, I'll have a post about it. And as I mentioned, it's a video first interface, and so you see the videos. We're not seeing text so much. We're seeing videos that are students are posting, and then they're responding with a video. Also, it has these nice little metrics, 3.4 hours of discussion after just a few weeks. And over the course of a semester, it's fun to see that get big. It used to be clickable, and a little dialog box would pop up. And so 3.4 hours of discussion, something would say that's as long as it takes for a pebble to drop to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Or another one that that's as long as it takes a cheetah to run from LA to New York. That would be maybe more at the end of the semester. I was looking today and I don't see that that's there anymore. That's something they may have taken away. So I apologize if you're looking for that and it's not there. One other slide. This is not my image. This is from Flip, but I wanted to show it because it gives an idea of the different options available for students. And so the Flip app on the phone, which I thought I would use more, is helpful. And it's something that a lot of students, I think, will probably use it. Oddly enough, students like to post in their cars. I think it's because it's a quiet place. And so they'll have their phone on the dashboard and be able to upload their post easily that way. I found, however, kind of seeing the bigger screen behind the phone, that the computer works better for my purposes as thinking about posting videos for everyone. And then you can post YouTube videos. As you can see, you can add different kinds of files. And I just recently found out, and I haven't used it yet, although I did put it into my sandbox in Canvas, that there's an LTI Canvas integration available now. And so, and that's, I didn't mention this earlier, but that's the nice thing about having Microsoft owning it, is that we can use our call-in emails to log in, and students don't have to create a new account. They can just log in with their call-in emails, and makes it easy that way. And so it took a minute to get this set up, but they have good directions for how to do it. And the nice thing about having it in Canvas is that you can use SpeedGrader to flip through. And so I haven't used this yet, but it's available, and I imagine it would be helpful. And so I'll end with just a few ideas for how I've used Flip in the classroom, and then we'll move on to some Q&A. So I've used it as just a standard discussion board, as you probably guessed today. So here's a question. This is the book we're reading this week. What do you think of it? What are your ideas? One thing that I had a colleague mention is that they do is a standard discussion board, but with a delayed response. And so they'll have students post 1 week, and then the next week is when they'll put their response up. The idea is that they would actually watch some of the other videos, spend some time, rather than what I find students do is that they will post their video and then they will respond to somebody else right away. And so it lacks that kind of back and forth interaction. There's, even when they do that, they're still responding to another student. So there is some of that that interaction, but it doesn't feel as natural. A lot of times, and this is from Dr. Agarwal's presentation in January, is the idea of reflecting on your learning, thinking about what you're learning and what you're retaining. And so I'll have students or at the beginning and end of the semester, so an intro post or an outro post, what are the things that I've learned? What kind of ideas will I remember in 5 years, 10 years? One that I like at the beginning of the semester, I call it the brain dump. I think I probably got that from Dr. Agarwal as well. But the idea is just kind of, okay, I have 30 seconds. on my video. I'm just going to see what comes to my mind as I talk about the reading for the week. And then as we move on and get into kind of deeper questions, the ideas and questions that come up that are maybe a little bit more serious or thought through. And then one thing that I've used this semester that I hope is helping students is some explanations, or you can do mini lectures, and then students can have the opportunity to ask questions. I also Flip allows for screen capture, and so I've talked about how to do things in Canvas, or how to prepare to write a paper, to do library research. Those are all options. And so those are just some of the ideas that I've used. And I am happy to send along, if you're into the research, the bibliography on Padlet or Flip, or just asynchronous video in general, or I'm happy to answer any questions via email as well. But if we, I noticed there's some things going on in the chat. I haven't been watching it, but we can certainly go there now. Thanks for listening. I'm going to unshare my screen here. If I can remember how to do that. Oh, there it is.
Scott,
Okay.
you have one really good question in the chat from Cheryl, who asks if you use a rubric to grade your students' posts.
That's a good question. I don't at the moment. My posts are pretty, as I've started this, I can't remember if I mentioned this or not. In the spring, I offered the Flip and Padlet as I was doing the pilot as extra credit, thinking that that would motivate students to do it. But because it was optional, I didn't have as many students as I would have liked. And so I found that actually having these for credit, again, kind of challenges students to really move into it. But I do provide examples of what they should be doing. And so it's more of a completion grade for me at this point, but I could see that you could make it into more of a presentation. It could be used as a presentation at the end of the semester, where you would have maybe a full rubric about how to do it. But for me at this point, it's just a matter of trying to get students to interact with one another.
We also have a question from Ryan, who asks, which tool do you find yourself using more to teach composition or literature?
In terms of the applications I've talked about today, Ryan, Flip seems to be the one that I find to be the most useful. Feel free to chime in if you had a kind of a different angle with that question. I've just used it in literature, but I think it would work just as well in composition. I just have fewer literature courses, so it's and actually that's one thing that I've mentioned, is that as I've moved to online teaching, is I don't get that kind of face-to-face discussion that I used to enjoy in literature courses. The discussion board a lot of times will not provide that kind of feeling when you come out of class and you're like, well, that was a great discussion, that was fun. And so I'm hoping that Flip will kind of provide some of that opportunity. And so I think it could be used in literature or composition courses, or really any course that has discussion, or if there's discussion isn't a large part of the course, again, mini lectures, or an opportunity for the instructor to share information is also an option.
Claire asks if you have any tips for getting students to watch the asynchronous videos.
I have the same question. It's a good question. I think, yeah, I guess I'm looking at your question now. This is something that I think part of it is if there can be something that is interesting or intriguing. Of course, you're going to have students who post at the last minute and who aren't going to read anybody's and just post theirs and move on. But it's those students who are motivated, who are actually asking questions. I think one thing would be to jump into that discussion board and encourage. A lot of times I'll jump in and say, like, these posts are going really well, and then kind of give them some other directions. I've also found that students what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I've had student resistance. I mentioned earlier, I've had students who, in the spring, I had a student who said, I didn't do any of the posts because I didn't want to get on the video. And of course, she mentioned this at the very end of the semester rather than mentioning that earlier on. But I didn't think I mentioned this. Dr. Tolman, from this semester's development conference, he uses Flip in his, he has a synchronous course where he actually uses team-based learning, but they meet on at the same time, so he's not using asynchronous video as much, but he uses Flip. And I asked him about that, this idea of student resistance and how to get students to interact more, and he said it's probably fewer people are going to watch you talk in an online video than if you're in an actual classroom, because if you're in a classroom with 25 or 30 students and you say something, all of a sudden all those eyes are, everybody's looking at you. But I've found that students will, it shows how many views a video will get. And so whoever posts first, second, or third usually gets, between 10 and 15 views. And so half the class will be watching those early videos. And then as the class comes later in and posts at the last minute, they'll get fewer views. So I don't have a great answer to your question, but I think that just being able to try and jump in there and interact, and if students are resistant, to coach them a little bit and to remind them that this is a classroom. And I do offer the opportunity, if they don't want to do the video part, that's fine. You can also just do an audio recording. And so there's options for that as well.
There's also a question I saw from Laura asking about a time limit for how long the videos can be. Do you provide parameters in that way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's see. I don't think I showed you a post. Let me see if I can pull one up real quick. But yeah, there's quite a few options in the settings. Okay, let me share my screen again. And this is it's a live class. Not that anybody's on there at the moment. But this is what my current class looks like. And so I'll just click into one of these. And as I start, so that my intro post, you can click on, oh no, this is in the way, the settings, let's see. And so you put in your directions, and you're important, you put in your GIF, but and then you can decide how long you want it to be. Looks like the max is 10 minutes. I don't think I've ever done more than 3, but the time does go quickly as you think about it. You start talking, we do a brain dump or something, and 30 seconds goes by really quick. And so there's quite a few options. And the nice thing about it is if you have one that you typically do, it'll save the default. But I don't find that students have a problem filling the time if it's just a minute or 2 minutes. They tend to fill the time up well. And I know that they are spending a lot of time doing different takes, because I've had students say, well, it takes me forever just to post a 1-minute video because I have to record it over and over until I get it just right. And then there's people who don't do that and have a little less awareness, or they don't care what they look like on screen. So it can get interesting. So far, I haven't had anything that I've had to report or anything like that, but it can get interesting. And I think that's part of why I like it, is that there's it adds that element of like something in the classroom that we're used to in the classroom. It adds an element of humanity that we sometimes miss in online courses.
Shiva has also asked a question: do you use it as a graded assignment?
Yes, it's so typically my courses are on a 1,000-point scale. I used to do a 100-point scale, and I decided that 1,000 sounded more daunting. And it when a paper is worth 150 or 300 points, it might grab students' attention a little bit more. And so my discussion boards, whether they're text-based or video, they're like just a small 10 points. And so I think that's probably a good way to start with these kinds of assignments, is to have low stakes. That way students don't feel the pressure of like this discussion board, this video is going to make or break me. It's more just it's a weekly check-in. It's a way to stay involved in the course. And so when I did the extra credit, students wouldn't do that. And so they wouldn't be interacting. There would just be a handful of students that were doing it. But as I use it now as a graded discussion, students are, and at the first week, a few students got a 0, and they email and say, like, why did I get a 0? I didn't want to post in there. I was like, well, this is part of the class. And then I let them go back in and post. And it's just a way for them to check in. So low stakes. And then if you want to build, I haven't done this, but if you wanted to build to kind of a longer presentation, maybe you do a 5-minute video. It's nice that it has an endpoint and it'll cut them off. But they could do a presentation for their paper at the end of the semester. And so you could work up to kind of a high stakes assignment later in the semester, but certainly you'd want to start with one of these low stakes ones. Feel like there's a lot of good ideas going on in the chat that I can't keep up with. So I'll go back and look at it later to see what I can learn.
Shannon just asked, how is the quality of the students' videos content-wise?
It's really good. I didn't say this before, but it's kind of like TikTok, which I don't have a TikTok account, but of course we've all seen a TikTok video. And so I have one student who actually said that he has I don't know what they call themselves, but like a content producer or something. And so he had his setup, and he had like the background set just right, and he had, it allows for filters, and you can put music behind it. And so his posts were always really high quality and interesting. And the introduction post that I do just tell us something interesting about himself. He was like I think his TikTok was a food channel, and so he showed a picture of himself eating this giant donut. And so like those are the kinds of things that a text-based discussion board won't provide for. I guess you could post a picture of it or something, but most of the students their videos are pretty high quality. They spend some time doing it. Sometimes not so much. It seems like some students will post first thing in the morning when they get out of bed, and they don't really care what they look like or their background looks like. But for the most part, they're pretty high quality. And I think that's because Flip provides a lot of different kinds of video options. And so they're used to posting videos. So they do a good job.
I think Shannon's actually asking about what they, not the production value, but the content, like what they're saying, what they're doing.
Also important, probably more important. So they, the quality of the content is also very good. I found that students, and maybe I hope it helps them to do the reading, because they are always required, maybe not in an intro post, but they're always required to respond to a quotation. And so in a literature course, they read Beowulf. And so they have to read a few lines that they enjoyed and then respond to those. And so it's because it's video and their face and their voice are connected to the content, they have to put some thought into it. And so I've noticed that some students will type out a transcript, even if it's just kind of a brain dump or some kind of easier kind of prompt. And so they will spend some time that they probably wouldn't do otherwise. Or maybe they're treating it as a written discussion board, but then putting it into video format. And so for the most part, I would say the content quality is very good. Of course, not always, but for the most part.
Cheryl just asked, have you ever asked your students to evaluate each other's students' videos on the basis of their contribution to the content? For example, they might have a writing prompt. Which classmate's video helped you to better understand the concept, and why?
This is a great idea. I think I used to do this in the face-to-face classroom, but I haven't brought that into my Flip videos. But that's why I like the Q&A and discussion time, because I get good ideas. I think that would be a helpful, especially if you're doing kind of a higher stakes assignment later in the semester where they're putting together a presentation for a project. That would be I think that would be super helpful to put together kind of a rubric for them to evaluate each other, and knowing that your peers are going to evaluate you will just be another level of another challenge to do a good job. So I haven't done those for the short videos, but I think that would be a great idea for longer videos, maybe later on in the semester.
Are there any other questions for Scott?
Thanks, y'all. I hope you get a chance to use Flip for fun or for your classes. And if anybody ends up using it in Canvas, I think I'm going to try that next semester. So if you end up giving it a try inside the using the Canvas LTI integration, let me know how it goes, because I think I will need some help with that as well. But thanks for coming today, and thanks, Allison, for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Scott. Thanks everyone for being here.